Beloved, I want you to understand something very profound this morning. The moment you fail to commit your day into the hands of God, you open doors for unnecessary troubles, delays, and spiritual attacks. There is a divine strategy in entrusting every second of your day to the Almighty, and neglecting this simple act can cost you your peace, your progress, and your purpose. Today, I want to take you by the hand and show you why committing your day to God is not optional. It is essential. Many people wake up every morning as if the day belongs to them, as if the hours ahead are under their control, and they fail to understand the weight of starting a day without inviting God into it. The very first moments after you open your eyes are critical spiritual moments, moments that determine the trajectory of your entire day. If you rise and begin to move in your own strength, relying solely on your intellect, your plans, your emotions, or even your energy, you are setting yourself up for unnecessary struggles. You see, every day is a spiritual battlefield, and the natural cannot triumph over the spiritual. There are forces at work that you cannot see, and these forces are constantly observing, looking for any point of entry into your life. When you start a day without God, you give those forces a foothold. You might not realize it immediately, but small irritations, sudden delays, confusion in decision-making, and unexpected opposition often have a spiritual root. They come because the day was not surrendered to the Lord, because the mind and heart were not aligned with His wisdom, because the first step was taken without divine consultation. When you neglect God at the beginning of the day, you expose yourself to error. The human mind is brilliant, but it is limited. It does not see the end from the beginning. It does not perceive hidden dangers, and it does not have access to divine strategies. The natural man can plan, but he cannot guarantee that the plan will succeed in alignment with God's purpose. That is why starting the day without God is like stepping into a dense forest at night without a torch. You may walk forward thinking you are moving, but you are walking blindly, vulnerable to pitfalls, traps, and ambushes. Even in your workplace, in your business, in your relationships, and in your family, decisions made without seeking God's guidance often lead to regret, confusion, and unnecessary struggles. It is not because God is unwilling to help, but because you have neglected to invite Him into the process. Furthermore, when you start your day without God, you also compromise your peace. The enemy understands that peace is a sign of God's presence, and he will do everything to rob you of it. Anxiety, fear, irritation, and distraction are often the first fruits of a day that begins in independence from God. You may think these are normal human feelings or stress, but in many cases, they are indicators that your day started on the wrong foundation. Every unresolved matter, every unplanned encounter, every rush decision becomes a channel through which spiritual attacks can manifest. A simple delay, a misunderstood conversation, a misplaced document, or a sudden conflict can all be consequences of a day not committed to God. These are small things, yes, but the accumulation can become a burden that weighs down your spirit and diminishes your productivity and joy. Not only that, starting the day without God affects your effectiveness. You may work hard, but your efforts will not yield the results they were meant to yield. The blessings that were meant to manifest through divine guidance will be delayed or diverted. Your ideas may be good, your efforts may be genuine, but without God's wisdom and direction, many of them will not achieve their intended purpose. This is why so many people struggle to see breakthrough. It is not always because they are lazy or unqualified, but because they move in their own strength rather than in alignment with God's plan. Every moment of the day that is not anchored in prayer and submission is a moment that can be hijacked by confusion, error, and delay. Another consequence is that starting the day without God leaves you vulnerable to spiritual distractions. The human heart is naturally susceptible to fear, pride, anger, and temptation. And the enemy takes advantage of moments when your spiritual defenses are down. When you have not dedicated your morning to God, you operate in your flesh and in your own understanding, making it easier for negative thoughts, destructive desires, and unhealthy emotions to take root. The small choices you make early in the day often set a pattern for the rest of the hours ahead. A single unresolved conflict, a single unwise decision, or a single moment of impatience can spiral into a day full of regret and exhaustion. You begin to wonder why life seems so heavy, why progress is so slow, why success feels elusive, when the truth is that the day was never properly submitted to the Lord from the beginning. Finally, there is a spiritual consequence that is often overlooked: the missed opportunities for favor and divine encounters. God ordains moments in your day that can change your destiny, appointments with people, divine instructions, revelations, and windows of breakthrough that are only accessible when you start your day with Him. By neglecting to seek His guidance first, you may still go through the motions of life, but you miss the supernatural advantage that could have made your day extraordinary. The natural sees only the ordinary, but those who commit their days to God walk in the extraordinary because they are guided, protected, and aligned with heaven's order. Every hour of your day carries spiritual weight, and many believers move through their daily schedules without recognizing that time is a battlefield. There are hours in your day that, if left uncommitted, become open doors for unnecessary attacks, delays, and distractions. The enemy does not waste time. He studies patterns, observes routines, and waits for moments of negligence to strike. When your hours are uncommitted, you unknowingly give him permission to interfere with your plans. These attacks are not always loud or visible. They often come in subtle forms: moments of confusion, minor conflicts, small errors, sudden fatigue, or distractions that steal your focus. An uncommitted hour becomes a doorway through which spiritual opposition can flow. And many people are unaware that the chaos in their day is not merely coincidence, but a reflection of spiritual neglect. The principle is simple. The enemy can only influence what is not under God's authority. When you begin your day without dedicating your hours to the Lord, you essentially leave blank spaces in the schedule of your life, and blank spaces are opportunities for attacks. These are the moments when stress accumulates unnecessarily, when relationships become tense without reason, when finances feel tight despite your efforts, and when opportunities slip through your fingers. It is not the natural circumstances that cause the problem. It is the spiritual vulnerability created by hours that have not been surrendered to God. Every uncommitted hour is a time in which your mind, your emotions, and your spirit operate in independence, and independence from God always attracts interference. The spiritual realm is sensitive to alignment, and where alignment with heaven is absent, disorder will manifest in the natural. Moreover, uncommitted hours create a fertile ground for distraction. When you fail to dedicate your time to prayer, meditation, or intentional focus on God's presence, your attention becomes scattered. Your mind drifts toward worry, fear, doubt, and worldly entanglements. You find yourself reacting instead of responding, drifting instead of advancing, and worrying instead. Walking in peace. The enemy takes advantage of this scattered focus. He knows that a distracted mind cannot hear divine instructions, cannot recognize opportunities, and cannot guard against pitfalls. Every moment spent in negligence becomes a moment in which negative influences can operate. And many people never understand why they feel spiritually exhausted, mentally burdened, or chronically behind schedule. There is also the issue of missed divine protection. God's angels are assigned to protect those who honor Him, to shield them from accidents, attacks, and hidden dangers. But protection often comes in response to obedience and commitment. When your hours are uncommitted, you are not fully operating under God's covering. You are partially exposed, and even minor disruptions that could have been prevented by divine intervention take place. It may be a car breaking down, a sudden misunderstanding at work, or an unexpected health challenge. These are not punishments, but consequences of leaving your time unsecured in God's hands. Every uncommitted hour diminishes your spiritual armor and leaves you susceptible to situations that could have been avoided if you had begun that hour in submission and prayer. Furthermore, uncommitted hours attract unnecessary spiritual weariness. Many believers go through life feeling drained and overwhelmed, and they do not realize that spiritual fatigue often begins with hours that are ignored. When you do not dedicate your time intentionally, the enemy can subtly inject heaviness into your spirit, doubt into your mind, and impatience into your heart. Tasks that should take minutes become burdens that consume energy. Decisions that should be clear become complicated. That relationships that should be peaceful become tense. This is not always noticeable immediately, but over time, the accumulation of uncommitted hours creates patterns of struggle that seem normal, yet are deeply unnatural from a spiritual perspective. Uncommitted hours also hinder favor and divine appointments. The Lord has strategically arranged your life with windows of opportunity, moments of divine encounter, and avenues for breakthrough that are time sensitive. When your hours are left uncommitted, these opportunities are missed. You may go through the day thinking you are productive, but many doors that could have opened remain closed because the timing was not under divine orchestration. The enemy is not only content to cause obstruction, he also ensures that blessings and opportunities that could shift your life are delayed or diverted when your time is not committed to God. Finally, the spiritual pattern is clear. Consistency in committing your hours creates a rhythm of divine alignment, protection, favor, and breakthrough. Conversely, neglecting to commit your hours produces disorder, vulnerability, distraction, and wasted potential. Every hour that is uncommitted is a window of exposure, a time when spiritual attacks are more likely to manifest, and a moment in which the natural and spiritual consequences of negligence intersect. It is not enough to pray once in the morning and assume the day is secured. Each hour requires intentional submission to God, for His kingdom operates with precision, and the enemy exploits every moment that is left unguarded. There is a principle in the kingdom of God that cannot be ignored. Before any meaningful action takes place, there must be alignment with heaven. Many people rush into their days, their plans, their work, their businesses, and their relationships without first seeking divine guidance. And as a result, they encounter frustration, confusion, and unnecessary delays. The act of prayerful alignment is not just a ritual. It is a spiritual strategy that positions you to move in divine timing and under supernatural favor. When you pray before you act, you are not only seeking God's approval, you are inviting Him to lead your steps, to order your decisions, and to guard your actions from opposition. Prayerful alignment creates a connection between your natural effort and God's supernatural intervention. And without it, all your effort can be misdirected, incomplete, or counterproductive. The first reason prayerful alignment is powerful is that it brings clarity. When you approach a task, a decision, or a challenge in the natural, your perspective is limited. The human mind sees only a fraction of reality. It cannot perceive hidden dangers, subtle opportunities, or the consequences that lie beyond the immediate. Prayer opens your spiritual eyes and allows you to see with God's wisdom. You begin to recognize where to go, when to act, and what steps to prioritize. Without this alignment, you operate in partial darkness, making decisions based on incomplete understanding. You may think you are moving forward, but in reality, you may be moving toward unnecessary conflict, loss, or wasted effort. Alignment through prayer ensures that your steps are not only informed, but also empowered by divine insight. Prayerful alignment also protects you from spiritual opposition. The Bible teaches that the enemy prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Every action taken without God's guidance is an open invitation for resistance. It may not always manifest dramatically, but the subtle forces of delay, confusion, and distraction can easily disrupt your plans. When you pray before you act, you are effectively calling upon God's protection and sending away any hidden attacks that could have sabotaged your day. It is a strategic shield, a spiritual firewall, ensuring that your efforts are not wasted. Those who neglect this alignment often experience repeated setbacks, not necessarily because they are incapable, but because they have exposed themselves to unnecessary spiritual friction. Another profound effect of prayerful alignment is that it attracts favor. There is a dimension of success that is purely supernatural, and no matter how talented, intelligent, or hardworking a person is, favor is the key that opens doors that human effort alone cannot. When your actions are preceded by prayer, you position yourself in such a way that divine opportunities are presented to you. People begin to respond favorably. Circumstances begin to shift, and what would have been difficult becomes manageable. Prayer aligns your will with God's will. And when God's will is activated in the natural, doors that were closed open effortlessly, and assignments that were meant to be impossible become achievable. Moreover, prayerful alignment cultivates patience and reduces frustration. Many people act hastily because they are anxious to see results, or because they rely solely on their own understanding. Hasty actions often produce unintended consequences, confusion, and a cycle of repeated mistakes. When you begin with prayer, you enter into a rhythm of waiting for divine instruction, seeking confirmation, and discerning the right steps. This process ensures that you act at the right time, in the right manner, and with the right heart. Acting without alignment often leads to regret, while acting after prayer instills confidence, peace, and the assurance that your actions are blessed and ordered by God. The power of prayerful alignment is also seen in decision-making. Life constantly presents choices, big and small, and the quality of those decisions determines the trajectory of your progress. When you pray first, you receive insight into which choices will advance your purpose and which ones will bring unnecessary delay. You learn to distinguish between opportunities that are distractions and those that are assignments. Without this spiritual insight, you may inadvertently choose paths that drain your energy, consume your resources, and divert you from your destiny. Alignment through prayer allows you to operate in precision, avoiding unnecessary detours and positioning yourself in the exact place where God's favor can manifest. Finally, the principle extends beyond personal success to relationships and influence. Every interaction, conversation, and collaboration can be impacted positively or negatively, depending on whether you are aligned with God's timing and guidance. Prayerful alignment before engagement ensures that your words, actions, and intentions are infused with wisdom, favor, and authority. It reduces conflict, enhances understanding, and attracts cooperation from those around you. It is not merely about avoiding failure. It is about creating conditions for excellence, supernatural influence, and kingdom impact. Every day is filled with moments that seem ordinary on the surface, but are spiritually significant in ways we often fail to recognize. These moments, if left unguarded, can become points of vulnerability through which distractions, attacks, and misalignment enter our lives. Many believers move through their daily routines unaware that specific periods of the day are more susceptible to spiritual and natural challenges. It is not that God is absent in these moments, but rather that our negligence creates windows of opportunity for the enemy to interfere. Identifying these moments is critical because awareness is the first step toward protection and strategy. Once you recognize the times in which you are most vulnerable, you can deliberately act to guard them through prayer, intentionality, and spiritual discipline. Morning hours, for instance, are perhaps the most crucial. The first few minutes and hours after waking often set the tone for the entire day. When you wake up and immediately engage with the world without dedicating your heart and mind to God, you expose yourself to confusion, stress, and even spiritual attacks. Many people grab their phones, check messages, or rush into obligations before taking a moment to commit their day to God. And in doing so, they open their hearts to unnecessary anxiety, distraction, and opposition. The mind is still fresh and impressionable in the early hours, making it a critical time for either alignment with God or susceptibility to negative influence. How you spend the first hour of your day can either strengthen your spiritual defenses or leave you vulnerable to subtle pressures that shape the rest of your day. Midday is another period of vulnerability. By this time, energy can dip, decisions may become rushed, and distractions are abundant. Workplaces, schools, and homes present constant interruptions that can easily divert focus from purpose. When spiritual vigilance is absent, the mind is prone to impatience, frustration, and distraction. Midday fatigue is not purely physical, it is spiritual as well. Unchecked emotions, unchecked thoughts, and moments of negligence during this time can create mistakes that lead to unnecessary stress, conflict, or setbacks. Many people wonder why they feel drained or why minor problems escalate, not realizing that these moments of vulnerability are natural touch points for the enemy to exploit. Recognizing midday as a spiritually sensitive period allows you to intentionally refresh your focus, pause for prayer, and regain alignment with God's purpose for the day. Evening routines carry vulnerability, though they often go unnoticed. As the day winds down, people are physically tired, emotionally worn, and spiritually lax. This is when decisions made out of haste or exhaustion can create long-term consequences. Neglecting reflection, gratitude, and prayer in the evening can leave unresolved spiritual matters lingering, which then accumulate over time. Relationships that require reconciliation, work that requires attention to detail, and personal disciplines that need consistency are all vulnerable to neglect if the evening is left unguarded. These hours are critical for evaluating the day, releasing its challenges to God, and preparing for a peaceful night that will set the stage for a strong following day. Without intentionality, small mistake is overlooked responsibilities during this period can spiral into larger issues, revealing how vulnerable our routines can be without spiritual awareness. Transitions between activities are also moments of vulnerability. Whenever you move from one task to another, from one environment to another, or from one mindset to another, there is a natural opening for distraction, doubt, and spiritual interference. The enemy often works subtly during these transitions, inserting confusion, impatience, or distraction when we are not paying attention. Even a 5-minute gap between meetings or a few idle moments while waiting can become points of compromise if not intentionally surrendered to God. Many believers underestimate the importance of these small windows, yet they accumulate into larger patterns of spiritual vulnerability, shaping the outcome of the day in ways that are invisible until the consequences appear. Emotional highs and lows are further areas of vulnerability in daily routines. When circumstances elicit extreme happiness, excitement, anger, or frustration, the heart is impressionable. Emotions can guide decisions, shape interactions, and influence priorities in ways that may either align with God or deviate from His will. Spiritual maturity involves recognizing these moments and intentionally submitting them to God. Neglecting emotional vulnerability can lead to unguarded words, impulsive actions, and relational conflicts that might have been avoided with simple awareness and prayer. Finally, unguarded spiritual habits such as neglecting prayer, meditation, and reflection create chronic vulnerability throughout the day. A routine that does not account for deliberate spiritual engagement allows the mind and heart to drift into dependence on self rather than God. Over time, these small gaps in discipline accumulate into patterns of vulnerability that manifest as delayed progress, repeated mistakes, and unnecessary interference. Awareness of vulnerable moments is not simply about caution. It is about strategy. The believer who understands where weakness tends to occur can proactively create spiritual safeguards intentionally, aligning every routine with God's protection, guidance, and favor. Spiritual stewardship is one of the most overlooked principles in the life of a believer, yet it carries tremendous weight in determining how God's favor operates in your life. Every day presents opportunities to exercise stewardship over time, resources, relationships, thoughts, and actions. And how you handle these determines whether favor will be released or withheld. Favor is not simply a matter of luck. It is often the result of consistent obedience and alignment with God's principles. When you treat your day as sacred, when you deliberately dedicate your time, energy, and focus to God's agenda, you position yourself to receive supernatural support that cannot be earned through effort alone. Those who ignore this stewardship live in a cycle of struggle, while those who are intentional experience breakthroughs that seem sudden, but are actually the result of faithful daily discipline. Daily spiritual stewardship begins with the recognition that time is a divine resource. Each hour, each minute, and each decision carries potential impact, and wasting them or leaving them uncommitted invites stagnation. God has allotted a measure of time to everyone, and the wise understand that how they manage it determines their capacity for favor. A day spent in prayer, in reflection, in intentional service, or in obedience to God's instruction is a day invested in kingdom advancement and personal alignment with God. Conversely, a day spent carelessly, distracted by worldly concerns, or in pursuit of selfish ambitions without seeking divine guidance becomes a missed opportunity for favor to manifest. Time is the currency through which spiritual authority operates, and neglecting it diminishes the weight of your testimony and the potency of your breakthrough. The steward also exercises control over the heart and thoughts. Favor is released when the inner man is aligned with God's standards. Jealousy, impatience, anger, and pride weaken the capacity to receive divine intervention, while humility, gratitude, and faithfulness open channels for favor to flow. Daily spiritual stewardship is therefore an internal exercise, a conscious effort to guard your heart, to renew your mind, and to submit every thought to God. The believer who stirs this aspect experiences favor in relationships, in decision-making, and in opportunities that naturally attract success. The one who neglects it finds themselves repeatedly frustrated, misunderstood, and blocked despite earnest effort. Stewardship is not a passive principle. It is active engagement with your spirit, your mind, and your priorities to align with heaven's order. Prayer is a vital part of daily spiritual stewardship. By committing the day to God, the steward invites divine alignment, protection, and favor. Prayer ensures that each action taken is not merely driven by personal ambition, but is guided by divine purpose. Those who neglect to pray expose themselves to random outcomes, unnecessary delays, and spiritual vulnerability. The act of seeking God first, of intentionally presenting each task, relationship, and decision before Him, establishes a pattern of favor that accumulates over time. It is in these moments of discipline that God positions his angels to direct paths, close doors that should remain closed, and open doors that are strategically aligned with destiny. Favor follows the faithful steward, not the impulsive, the reckless, or the distracted. Stewardship also extends to relationships. The way you honor, respect, and serve those around you has a direct impact on how favor flows. God often positions individuals in your life to facilitate advancement, blessings, and opportunities. Daily stewardship ensures that these relationships are nurtured with integrity, wisdom, and humility. The failure to manage interactions carefully can lead to unnecessary conflicts, broken alliances, and missed divine appointments. Favor is relational as much as it is spiritual. The steward who invests in healthy, godly interactions experiences support and guidance that accelerates progress beyond personal effort. Resources are another area of daily spiritual stewardship. Financial discipline, ethical conduct, and wise management of possessions reflect a heart aligned with God. Favor often comes through the doors of opportunity that are accessed by responsible stewardship. God multiplies what is faithfully managed and opens supernatural avenues for provision and success. Mismanagement, on the other hand, invites delays, disappointment, and unnecessary complications. The principle is consistent. What is entrusted to the faithful steward grows, while negligence leads to limitation and struggle. Finally, favor accumulates through consistency. Spiritual stewardship is not occasional. It is daily. Each day it's a building block. And over time, the disciplined steward sees cumulative results. Morning prayers, deliberate focus, guarding the heart, ethical conduct, faithful relationships, and diligent use of resources are all pieces of a consistent pattern that produces an atmosphere of divine favor. The person who embraces daily stewardship positions themselves in a rhythm of blessing where doors open, protection manifests, and opportunities are. IGN with destiny. Each day becomes a statement of obedience, a declaration of intentionality, and a platform through which God can operate powerfully. Many believers go through their days as if life is a series of random events, never realizing that each day carries the potential to be a divine appointment if he's properly committed to God. Commitment is more than simply making a decision. It is a deliberate act of entrusting your time, thoughts, actions, and interactions into God's hands with the expectation that he will order your steps. The ordinary hours, the mundane routines, the seemingly insignificant tasks, when committed to God, become opportunities for favor, breakthroughs, and supernatural encounters. This is the mystery of divine appointments. God's hand moves when there is intentionality and surrender. What many overlook is that the lack of commitment keeps people bound to the natural, leaving them to operate in ordinary outcomes, while the committed experience the extraordinary because they have aligned themselves with heaven's timing and purpose. The first impact of commitment is the activation of divine guidance. When you dedicate your day to God, you invite his wisdom into every decision, interaction, and movement. Your natural mind becomes infused with supernatural insight, and doors that would otherwise remain closed are opened. Commit your day, and suddenly opportunities that seemed hidden or inaccessible become visible. The people you are meant to meet cross your path. Solutions to challenges appear just in time, and the steps you take are synchronized with destiny. Without this commitment, these opportunities often pass unnoticed or are missed entirely because the natural mind cannot perceive the strategic orchestration of God. Ordinary days, when surrendered, transform into days filled with divine direction, where every hour carries meaning and every action aligns with God's will. Commitment also activates divine favor. There is a supernatural dimension where God orchestrates circumstances to benefit those who honor him with their time and actions. A committed believer does not merely work harder. They experience doors opening, relationships strengthening, and assignments being accelerated beyond ordinary capacity. Favor is released in ways that defy human understanding, and the ordinary tasks of the day begin to carry extraordinary outcomes. For example, a simple conversation can lead to life-changing opportunities. A routine errand can become a divine encounter, or a small act of obedience can trigger blessings that ripple far beyond immediate comprehension. The principle is clear. Commitment aligns your life with God's favor, turning every hour into a potential point of impact. Another crucial effect of commitment is spiritual protection. Every day carries unseen battles, and the uncommitted are vulnerable to distraction, temptation, and opposition. When you commit your day to God, you essentially place a hedge around your life, inviting His angels to guard your steps and ensuring that the enemy cannot easily interfere. Challenges may still arise, but they will be redirected, mitigated, or transformed into lessons and stepping stones rather than destructive setbacks. Ordinary days that are unguarded allow frustration, fatigue, and unexpected crises to dominate. But commitment creates a spiritual buffer that preserves peace, clarity, and focus. It is in these committed moments that the believer walks confidently, knowing that divine oversight is active and that every step is being measured and guided. Commitment also changes perception. The ordinary believer sees life as routine and repetitive, while the committed believer sees divine strategy, purpose, and opportunity in every moment. When the day is surrendered to God, mundane tasks take on significance because they are executed under divine instruction. Commuting to work, attending meetings, interacting with colleagues, or managing household responsibilities all become vessels through which God can operate. The committed MI, ND, discerns heaven's fingerprints on everyday moments, understanding that no time is wasted when every action is offered to God in faith, obedience, and focus. This perception transforms the ordinary into extraordinary, elevating the believer from routine living to spiritually enriched experiences. Furthermore, commitment produces consistency and momentum. A day intentionally handed over to God sets a standard for subsequent days. When commitment is practiced regularly, it creates a rhythm of alignment where each day builds upon the previous one, compounding favor, insight, and divine opportunity. This consistency trains the spirit to recognize and respond to God's instructions, strengthens spiritual discipline, and produces a lifestyle where divine appointments are the norm rather than the exception. Ordinary moments, when consistently committed, become touch points for supernatural influence, forming a pattern that shapes destiny over time. Finally, commitment turns intention into impact. Many people have goals, dreams, and visions, but without committing the day, the natural limits often constrain the realization of these purposes. Commitment bridges the gap between human effort and divine orchestration. It converts ordinary routines into extraordinary encounters, infuses effort with supernatural effectiveness, and transforms time from a neutral resource into a conduit of blessing, favor, and divine influence. Those who master this principle consistently report breakthroughs, timely connections, and moments where what they once considered routine becomes a platform for destiny, demonstrating that the true power of commitment lies not only in intention, but in surrender to God's perfect will.